She mistook him for the new intern. He let her believe it until she walked into his office the next day. "Wait, oh no, Elena!" gasped as the stack of papers in her hand slipped free and scattered across the polished marble floor of the lobby. She dropped to her knees instantly, scrambling to gather them. These weren't just any documents. These were the briefing notes for the executive team's Monday morning meeting, which started in exactly 10 minutes. If even one chart or budget summary was missing, her manager would have her head. As she reached for the last page, someone beat her to it. "Careful," came a calm voice. She looked up, her eyes meeting a man in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up just past his forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his tie was loosened just enough to suggest either a long morning or an easy attitude. He held out the paper with a crooked smile. "You dropped a few. Lives here," he added, glancing at the data on the page. She snatched it with breathless urgency. "Thank you. You just saved mine." "Happy to help," he said with a slight bow. Elena stood, tucking the now gathered documents tightly into her folder. She gave him a once-over. White shirt, dark slacks, no badge, visible and definitely not someone she had seen around before. She tilted her head. "Wait, are you new? I haven't seen you around." He stood, tucking his hands in his pockets. "Kind of." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "Let me guess. You're the new intern we were supposed to get last week. The one from corporate." There was a small pause. Then the man smiled again. "David?" She nodded, brushing her skirt and standing straight. "Well, David, welcome to the lower floors of corporate purgatory. I'm Elena, document runner, printer, whisperer. I sit so far from a window. I sometimes forget what sunlight looks like." David chuckled. "Sounds like a noble position." "Ah, noble's a stretch," she said, smoothing her blouse and hugging the folder tight to her chest. "But hey, it pays my rent." "Kind of." She stepped into the elevator, holding the door open for him. "Come on, you'll want to avoid looking too lost on your first day." That's when the sharks smell blood. David followed her in, standing beside her as the doors closed. Elena pushed the button for floor 12. That's where the marketing chaos happens. I suggest smiling a lot and keeping your coffee. Order straight and avoid talking too much to the execs unless you're fluent in cold stares and condescension. "Noted," David said with a smirk. She leaned against the railing, eyes sparkling with dry humor. "Seriously though, people up there are sharp but intense. They like perfect. They expect silence. So don't mention you helped me or that I spilled everything. I don't need more fuel for my high-strung intern label." David lifted a hand in a silent oath. "Mum's the word," and she added with a mock-serious tone, "If Carol from finance offers you a protein bar, say no. Just trust me." He laughed again, an easy, genuine sound. She glanced sideways at him. "You seem way too calm for your first day. Wow, most interns look like they're about to faint." "Maybe I'm just good at pretending," he said. The elevator dinged. Elena gathered her folder with a tight grip. "Well, good luck, David. Maybe I'll see you at the free granola station later." "Looking forward to it," he replied. She stepped out quickly, rushing toward the meeting room. David stayed behind in the elevator, watching the doors close, with a quiet smile. He said nothing, made no correction. David just smiled, said nothing, and let the misunderstanding begin. By the end of the week, it had become a quiet routine. Lunch at the cafeteria with the new intern, laughter over cheap coffee, and shared glances that made Elena feel oddly seen. She did not quite know how or why it had started, only that it had become the easiest part of her days. She was the one who initiated it. After all, he had saved her before that meeting, chasing her down with the folders. She nearly lost her job over, and she felt she owed him. That Monday, she saw him appear near the desk by the lockers, and she waved 2 plastic trays of food from the cafeteria as if they were a gourmet feast. "You saved my butt," she declared, setting one tray down. "The least I can do is treat you to overcooked pasta and government-grade garlic bread. David looked amused. Is this how workplace gratitude works now? In my world, yes. And besides, the spaghetti has character. Kind of like you. He chuckled and dug in without complaint. From that moment on, they fell into an unspoken pattern. Lunch breaks were spent at the worn table near the vending machines. They shared paper cups of watery coffee. Elena explained the office's unofficial politics, the unspoken war over the good stapler, the sacred stash of Carol's questionable protein bars, and the mythical functioning copier on the second floor. David listened, laughed, and offered the occasional dry, perfectly timed comment that left her giggling longer than she should have. But more than that, he listened. Really listened. And that was something she wasn't used to. What surprised her most wasn't the banter or even the weird, unexpected chemistry. It was how easy it was to talk to him. Not just about work, but about life. One rainy afternoon, as they watched gray streaks slide down the window, she stirred sugar into her tea and spoke, her voice quieter than usual. My mom's on dialysis, she said, 3 times a week. David looked up, his fork pausing, halfway to his mouth. That sounds like a lot. It is, she admitted, then gave a small shrug. But you get used to it. I mean, she's tougher than I'll ever be. I just keep things going. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He didn't say I'm sorry in that automatic awkward way people did. He just nodded and let her words hang there dignified and unjudged. I do nights at the coffee shop near my apartment, she added after a moment. It helps. Bills don't wait. David gave a low whistle. Do you ever sleep? Enough to function, she replied, with a grin. Barely. Then, her eyes on the rainy sky, she said, someday I want to open my own little shop, a print place near a school or a library. Maybe add a coffee machine, hang some photos on the wall. Nothing fancy, just quiet, just mine. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until she glanced at him. Usually this was where people laughed or told her to be realistic, but David didn't. Sounds like a place I'd go to, he said. She blinked. Really? Yeah. It's not big or flashy, but it sounds useful, safe, and completely yours. She smiled, surprised at how much his words meant. God, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, she muttered, brushing her hair behind her ear. Maybe because I'm a safe stranger, he offered, with terrible cafeteria taste. Maybe, she whispered. Later that week, she struggled to carry a crate of bottled water up the narrow back stairs. Before she could even curse, David appeared behind her wordlessly, lifting half the load from her arms. She nearly dropped the rest in surprise. You don't have to. You looked one step from swearing. I was mid-swear, she muttered, breathless. The next morning, she opened her drawer and found a post-it note waiting inside. The handwriting was neat, steady. One step at a time. You're doing great. Elena stared at it for a long moment. Then she carefully peeled it from the drawer and tucked it into her wallet. She could not explain the warmth blooming in her chest or the way her fingers brushed the note more than once throughout the day. But something had begun to take root in the middle of her very ordinary life. It was quiet, careful, like sunlight sneaking in through a window no one had noticed. And David, he still hadn't corrected her once. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. Elena had just fixed the temperamental printer for the third time that morning and was about to sneak away for a 5-minute coffee break when her supervisor's voice cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. Elena, Mark called, not even looking up from his phone. They need you upstairs. VIP meeting, boardroom setup, refreshments, pastries, the whole 9 yards. Don't spill anything, she froze. Upstairs meant the executive floor. She had never been up there. It was practically a different world, marble floors, glass, offices, leather chairs, and people who spoke in acronyms and barely made eye contact with anyone not on their pay grade. She nodded quickly, grabbing the refreshment card and wiping her palms against her skirt to hide the sudden sweat. The elevator ride felt slower than usual, even though she was alone. She caught sight of her reflection in the mirrored panel and winced. There were faint shadows under her eyes from a late shift at the coffee shop the night before. Her simple white blouse was slightly wrinkled from rushing that morning, and her hair, blonde and usually kept in a neat bun, had frizzed at the edges from the building's humidity. She took a breath and stepped out as the elevator doors slid open. The boardroom was larger than any room she'd ever worked in. Floor-to-ceiling windows washed the room in sunlight. A polished mahogany table stretched across the space like a runway, surrounded by tall leather chairs. The air felt colder up here, controlled, important. She moved quietly, head down, arranging pastries and coffee cups with practiced care. A few executives were already seated, murmuring in low tones about quarterly reviews and projections. Then came the sound of more footsteps. She looked up and her world tilted. At the head of the table stood David, but not the David she knew from lunch breaks and sticky note pep talks. He was in a tailored navy suit, freshly pressed. His posture was crisp, his expression composed, confident, untouchable. "Everyone," the regional director announced, "please welcome David Laurent, our new vice president of strategic development. He's just returned from heading our operations in Europe." The room clapped. Elena did not move. Her fingers clenched the edge of the tray until her knuckles whitened. Her breath stuck in her throat. Vice President, her brain stuttered, replaying every word she had ever spoken to him. All the jokes, the complaints, the little confessions, the lunchroom sarcasm, the time she taught him how to clear a paper jam and teased him about being useless with printers. The day she confessed she wanted to open a dollar photo booth, and he had just listened quietly. He had never corrected her, not once. Her cheeks burned with the weight of it all, a deep, mortifying red that spread from her ears to her collar. She set the final cup down and turned to leave, walking faster than necessary toward the door. But before she could escape, his voice stopped her. "Elena?" She froze, her hand on the handle. He spoke gently. "Can we talk after the meeting?" She gave a barely perceptible nod. Then she left, eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't cry. Not in front of them, not even in the elevator. But when she reached the stairwell, a place no one ever went except maintenance staff, she sat down on the cold metal step and let the tears fall silently. An hour later, she was in the break room pretending to be busy with the napkin drawer when she heard his voice again. "Elena!" She turned slowly. David stood there, still in that suit, still looking every bit the man she now knew he was, but his expression was nothing like the one worn by executives. It was open, honest, regretful. "I'm sorry," he said, "and when you mistook me for an intern, I should have corrected you." She swallowed. "Then why didn't you?" He paused, the words thick. "Because it was the first time someone didn't care who I was. You didn't want anything from me. You didn't pretend. You were just you and I. I didn't want that to end." Her throat tightened. "So what? I was your little escape, a curiosity?" "No." He stepped forward, but not too close. "You were real. The only real thing I had all week." She shook her head, blinking fast. "I get it," he added softly. "You probably don't want to see me again. But I meant every word, every lunch, every note." She didn't say anything. She couldn't. She looked at him one last time, his expression vulnerable, waiting, and then turned and walked away. Elena had always known her place in the building, third floor, far from the glass offices and boardroom above. But now, after everything, even the third floor felt too close. For days, she avoided the top floor, like it was radioactive. She stopped using the main elevator. She took the stairs, ducked into storage rooms when she saw someone in a suit, and rerouted her routines to minimize the chance of seeing him. David Laurent. She still couldn't say his full name without her chest tightening. She had poured her real self into those lunches, those walks, those quiet coffee moments, and all the while he had been someone else, entirely someone with power, status, expectations. Was it a game to him? Her phone buzzed one morning while she was filing a shipment log. David, I never laughed at you. I never meant to hurt you. I liked you from the first moment. You talked to me like I was just a person. She stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen, then locked the phone without replying. The next day, another message. David, it wasn't because you didn't know who I was. It was because you were still completely yourself, even when you thought I was nobody. That one, she deleted. But the worst part wasn't the messages. It was how much she missed him. His stupid jokes about elevator buttons. His sincere attention when she talked about her mom. The way he always waited for her to finish her sentence, even when the office buzzed around them. He had seen her. Not just her name badge or her job title, but the actual her. And somehow that made the betrayal worse. 3 days later, she returned to her desk after lunch and found a small paper bag resting on her chair. Confused, she opened it. The warm, earthy smell of ground coffee rose instantly. Her favorite blend, the dark roast. She had once mentioned during a rushed conversation near the vending machine. Inside the bag was a handwritten note on thick cardstock. Thank you for making me feel seen. Her breath caught. She sat down slowly, clutching the note. He remembered all the little things, the things that no one ever really noticed. Not the way she looked, not the work she did, but the person she was underneath all of it. She stared at the note for a long time. Still, she didn't reply. But the anger inside her began to fade, not into forgiveness, not yet, but into a quiet, lingering ache. That afternoon, she brewed the coffee and drank it at her desk. And when the scent filled her corner of the floor, something softened in her chest. She did not smile, but she did not throw the note away either. The sky cracked open around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, spilling rain across the glass facade of the office building. Elena was balancing a stack of printer paper when she noticed the downpour from the breakroom window. She sighed. Of course, she had forgotten her umbrella again. She took the long hallway toward the back exit, hoping to catch the bus before the rain worsened. But when she turned the corner, she stopped short. There, just outside the rear lobby doors, was David. He was standing next to one of the janitors, Mr. Ramon, who always worked the evening shift, helping him fold a large, wind-wrecked umbrella. The fabric had torn on one side, flapping uselessly like a broken wing. David, now drenched from the waist down, laughed softly as he helped the older man wrestle the stubborn metal frame back into shape. It was the same laugh she remembered from the elevator. The same gentle patience. No suit jacket today, just a rolled-up white shirt and slacks. For a moment, he looked like the intern she had first met. Elena didn't move. She watched as David clapped Mr. Ramon on the shoulder and waved him off toward the parking lot. Then he turned and saw her. Their eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. He didn't smile, not right away, just watched her the way he always did, like she was the only person in the room or the world. Elena hesitated, then opened the door and stepped under the narrow concrete overhang. The rain was a wall of silver just a few feet away. She tucked her hands into her cardigan sleeves and stared out into the storm. David didn't say anything at first. "Still no umbrella?" he asked, gently. She shook her head, her lips twitching. "Still terrible at remembering the basics," he offered her a half smile. "Some things don't change." The silence that followed was quieter than awkwardness, like a space waiting to be filled with something real. Elena exhaled slowly. "I'm not mad, because you're the vice president." David looked over. "I'm mad," she continued, "because when I talked to you, I let my guard down. I let you in. And now I don't know what was real." His voice came soft. "Everything I said was real." She turned toward him, the rain reflected in her eyes. "You let me believe you were someone else," she said. "You let me trust you. And I thought maybe," her voice caught, "I thought maybe I mattered. Not just because you found me interesting, but because you saw me." David stepped closer, but not too close, just enough that his voice dropped low between them. "You did matter. You still do." Elena swallowed, unsure what to say. He added quieter, "You're the only person who ever talked to me without filtering it through my jaw." Title: The only one who didn't flinch when I said something awkward. "You teased me, Elena. You scolded me for leaving coffee. Rings, you told me your story without expecting anything back. That meant more than you'll ever know." She looked away, blinking fast. "I didn't want to be a test," she murmured. "You weren't." She met his gaze again. And for once there was no suit, no office walls, no layers of power and performance between them. Just two people under a rain-soaked awning stripped down to honesty. He stepped back half a pace as if he knew she still needed air. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. "Want to share a cab?" he asked, his voice light. She paused, then nodded just once. And beside her, David smiled, not the polished executive grin, but the one that had started it all. They never called it dating. Not out loud, at least. There were no labels, no big declarations, just the quiet certainty of two people slowly learning the shape of each other's world. After work, when the office lights dimmed and the chatter of keyboards gave way to the low hum of janitor, carts and security doors clicking shut, Elena and David would slip out into the city. No destination planned, just footsteps falling into rhythm, except in the time that followed. The entire evening had a shape, unlike anything that had ever happened to her. They found each other in places no corporate badge could follow. A second-hand bookstore where a fat orange cat slept on the counter, beside the till. A Vietnamese restaurant with only 6 outdoor tables and a chalkboard menu. A late-night food truck that served only 2 dishes but never disappointed. And a park bench overlooking the river where streetlights shimmered on the water like fallen stars. There, in those stolen hours, they talked more than they ate, more than they touched. They listened. One evening, seated across from each other at a rickety patio table, beside a string of mismatched lanterns, Elena wrapped her fingers around a steaming bowl of pho and exhaled slowly like she was letting something settle. "I used to dream about owning a photo booth," she murmured, eyes not quite meeting his. David looked up, genuinely curious. "Like the ones in malls?" She smiled, small and almost nostalgic. "Not exactly. The portable kind, with instant prints. Years ago, I volunteered at this community center. There were kids who didn't have a single photo of themselves. Not one. I remember this girl, Alyssa. She must have been 6. She stared at the camera like it was magic. And when her photo printed, she held it like it was a treasure." David didn't speak. He just leaned in a little, the city's soft hum filling the spaces she left between her words. "I wanted to set one up outside. Schools," she continued. "Charge $1, just enough to cover the paper and ink. Give kids something to keep a memory. Proof that they mattered." She looked up, half expecting the usual gentle dismissal people gave when she talked like this. But David's voice was quiet and, "Sure. That's beautiful." She gave a self-conscious shrug. "It's kind of silly." "No," he said firmly. "It's probably the most unsilly thing I've ever heard." There was a softness in his gaze that made her look away. "Most people want yachts or crypto or IPOs," he added. "You want to give a kid a photo that says something." Elena laughed quietly. "Something impractical, maybe. Something good," he corrected. A silence settled between them, warm, unhurried. Then David stirred his tea and said, "When I was 12, my dad sat me down and told me I'd be CEO someday. Laurent men don't get to drift," he said. "They don't follow, they lead." Elena looked at him then. Really looked. For the first time, the corners of his voice curled with something deeper. "Since then," he continued, "every room I walk into, I'm either underestimated or feared. Never seen. Not for who I am." He smiled, faintly. "Then one day you looked at me and said you spilled your coffee, Intern. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like just a guy with bad coordination and a caffeine problem." She laughed, and something softened inside her. She reached across the table and lightly touched the edge of his hand. It was not quite a gesture of love, But it was something, a bridge, a beginning. They kept meeting after hours, under umbrellas, in corners of the city where names and titles faded. Sometimes it was a coffee to go and quiet laughter. Sometimes it was walking without, talking, letting silence do the heavy lifting. One night he brought her a photo printer. It was old, secondhand, and missing a manual. But it worked. She spent that weekend printing photos in her tiny apartment of herself, of her mother asleep on the couch, of David caught mid-laugh with a teacup in hand. "You look real," she told him when she showed him the print. He'd smiled. "That's because I was." In those simple things, a note, a printer, a dream gently returned to her, something honest, took root. Not loud, not flashy, but real. And in that truth, both of them, in their own quiet ways, began to believe, not just in the idea of each other, but in the possibility of something lasting, something that did not need a name to be true. The whispering started like static, soft, scattered, and almost ignorable. But by the end of the week, the office was buzzing louder than the copy machines. Elena, the file clerk from the ground floor, with him? Maybe that's why he always gets his coffee from the canteen. She heard it in the hallways, in the pause after greetings, and the side glances and half smiles that did not reach the eyes. One morning, as she placed a folder on a manager's desk, he smirked and said, climbing the corporate ladder fast, huh? She said, nothing. But inside, something cracked. It all came to a head the following Monday. An anonymous email was sent to Human Resources. Subject line, inappropriate conduct, executive favoritism. No signature, no proof, just a tangle of suggestions and judgments. The lines accused Elena of using personal relationships for professional advancement and questioned the integrity of leadership decisions regarding junior staff. She was called in for a confidential conversation, sitting across from the HR director, hands tight in her lap. Elena felt like she was back in high school being asked to explain why she missed curfew. "We're not making any assumptions," the director said gently, "but we received a report, and because it involves someone in upper leadership, we have to look into it." Elena opened her mouth, but no words came. Her mind spun through everything. The late walks, the printer he gave her, even the gentle way he looked at her when no one else did. She wasn't ashamed of any of it, but she was afraid of what people thought they saw. "I never asked him for anything," she whispered. "Not a raise, not a title, nothing." The HR director nodded, non-committal. "We understand. For now, just continue your work as usual. We'll speak again soon." She walked out of the room, numb. That afternoon, David stood at the threshold of the HR office, calm, composed, but there was a weight in his voice. "I'd like to clarify something," he said. The director blinked. "Mr. Laurent, this is still under review." "No, and I'm not here to interfere, but I want this on record." He paused. "Elena never asked for my attention. She never sought favor. If anything, I was the one drawn to her because she treated me like a person, not a position." The director frowned. "We understand your intention, and I'm willing to disclose everything," he added. "Our conversations, our meetings. If necessary, I'll step back from any decision involving her department. But I will not let a baseless assumption ruin the integrity of someone who has done nothing but work honestly." The room fell silent. Later that week, Elena was called in again. She expected a warning, a formal statement, maybe even a termination letter. Instead, the director handed her a new folder. "The PR team reviewed your writing samples, the ones you submitted last year for the newsletter project." Elena blinked. "I thought those were dismissed." "They were overlooked," the director admitted, "but they're impressive. There's a temporary opening for a junior PR coordinator. It's not a promotion, but it's a move to a floor where your voice can be used." Elena sat in stunned silence. Then she asked quietly, "This isn't because of him?" "No," the director said firmly. "It's because of you." She nodded, a slow, stunned smile creeping onto her lips. Later, as she packed her few things From the supply closet, someone had scribbled a note on a sticky pad and left it on her drawer. You kept your head up. That matters more than any title. No name, no signature. But somehow Elena knew who had written it. The sun slanted through the windows in long golden stripes as Elena stepped into the small shop at the corner of Maple and 3rd. The doorbell chimed softly behind her, the scent of old wood and fresh paint greeting her like an old friend. She blinked at the space, barely recognizing it. The last time she had passed this storefront, it was shuttered and forgotten, a closed-down photo shop that no one had entered in years. Now light spilled across newly sanded floors. Shelves lined the walls with delicate tins of tea, and at the back, under a window that let the afternoon pour in, was a counter with a brand-new Polaroid printer. David stood behind it, sleeves rolled up, dust smudged across the collar of his shirt. He turned when he heard her steps. "You came?" he said, smiling. "You said it was important," she replied, stepping forward, eyes scanning the transformation. "This place, it's beautiful." "It's not finished," he said, "but it's a start." He reached behind the counter and picked up a small camera, an old Polaroid, its buttons shiny from polish. "Bought this place last month," he said, handing it to her. "It used to be the only photo shop for 10 blocks. I asked the old owner why he closed. He said, kids stopped printing memories. Everything's on screens now." Elena looked down at the camera and moved her hands, then back at him. "I want this to be something different," he continued. "A place where kids can come after school, get a photo printed for $1, a picture of a birthday, a friend, a good test score, something real. And while they wait, maybe they can sit down for tea." "Photos and tea?" she asked, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. He nodded. "I remembered what you said about pictures that cost $1, but last a lifetime." She looked at him, emotion catching in her throat. "You did all this for them?" David stepped closer. "For you. For what matters to you." The silence between them was soft, full of light. She felt the weight of it, not heavy, but grounding. Something real, something steady. "You never needed me to build dreams for you," he said. "You just needed someone who saw yours." She blinked away the sudden sting in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be someone people built things for." "You are," he said simply. "You always were." Then from his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small box. Her breath caught. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her the way he had since the beginning. Not through her job title, not through expectation, but through the quiet awe of someone who had finally found home in a person. "I let you call me the intern," he said, kneeling slowly to one knee. "Because for the first time in years, I wasn't treated like a title. I wasn't the Laurent name. I was just a man holding your folder, hoping you'd smile." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, timeless. "I have had many names," he said. "Vice President, board member, heir. But the only title I want is the one I hope you'll give me." Elena stood frozen, tears spilling, without permission. "Will you marry me?" he asked. She couldn't speak at first, her heart pounding too loudly. But then, through the blur of tears and joy and disbelief, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Stood, slipping the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, laughter and tears mixing into one. Outside, the world kept spinning. But inside that sunlit shop, too, people stood with no more names, no more titles, just two hearts that had found a place to belong. 1 year later, the bell above the door of the dollar portrait and tea chimed constantly. The air smelled of fresh brewed jasmine and photo paper. A young girl with a bright pink bow in her hair, Alyssa, beamed as she held a new picture of herself and her best friend, the dollar bill, for it still clutched in her other hand. Elena, now wearing an apron dusted with flour from the morning's scones, smiled at her from behind the counter. David came out from the back room, carrying a fresh pot of tea, and his eyes met Elena's over the heads of their happy customers. It was the same look, the one that said, "I see you." Their life wasn't about boardrooms or corporate ladders anymore. It was built here, one photo, one cup of tea, one shared smile at a time. It was quiet. It was theirs. And it was more real than any title ever could be. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the quiet strength in being seen for who you truly are, then you're exactly where you belong. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you tales that warm the soul, celebrate resilience, and honor the magic of unexpected love. Subscribe now and never miss a moment that could change the way you see the world. Your next favorite story is just one click away. Because sometimes the best stories aren't the loudest, they're the most honest.